There's this phrase in finance that it always cracks me up. Accounting irregularities.
Hmm.
It sounds so polite, doesn't it? So
Yeah.
sort of harmless. Like maybe someone forgot to carry the one, or they lost a receipt for a client lunch.
It's the ultimate euphemism.
It is.
It's like calling a Category 5 hurricane a breezy afternoon, because usually, I mean, let's be honest, when we hear accounting irregularities in the news, it's not a simple math error. It's a smoke signal.
A huge smoke signal.
Yeah.
For something much, much darker.
Exactly.
And today we are doing a deep dive into what might be the mother of all irregularities. We're talking about a situation where the irregularity wasn't a missing receipt, but a missing 1.9 billion euros.
Billion with a B. It's a number that's hard to even comprehend.
I know. Try to picture it.
Well, just to visualize that for a second, if you stacked 1.9 billion euros in, say, 100 euro notes, you're looking at a stack that would literally reach into the stratosphere.
That's insane.
It is a colossal, colossal amount of money.
And for a very long time, the entire world, the entire financial market, thought that money was sitting safely in a couple of bank accounts in the Philippines.
Right. Bolstering the balance sheet of Wirecard, which was, at the time, the absolute pride of the German tech sector. A titan.
But then, in June of 2020, we all learned that the money wasn't just missing. It likely never existed in the first place.
It's the story of Wirecard, and frankly, even now, even though it's been nearly 6 years since the collapse, it still feels like a fever dream.
It really does.
I mean, if you pitch this as a movie script, you've got hackers for hire, fugitive executives who are suspected of being Russian spies, regulators hunting journalists instead of criminals. Hollywood would probably reject it.
They'd say it's too unbelievable.
Exactly. Tone it down a bit.
It really is the German Enron, but honestly, with way more spycraft. It's wild. And the reason we are revisiting this whole saga today, here in February 2026, is that we finally have a new and very concrete chapter of closure.
That's right.
We've had speculation for years, but just last month, in January, the courts in Singapore handed down some really significant sentences that I think they close the loop on the actual mechanics of the fraud.
They absolutely do. For the longest time, the big question was always how.
Right.
How do you fake 1.9 billion euros? You can't just write a number on a napkin and show it to an auditor.
Right.
You need a system. You need infrastructure. And the sentencing of these two individuals, R. Shanmugaratnam and James Henry O'Sullivan in Singapore, gives us the judicial stamp. It confirms exactly how that machinery of deception worked.
We're definitely going to get into those sentences later because they are so key to unlocking this whole mystery. But to really understand how we got to a courtroom in Singapore in 2026, we have to go back.
Way back.
Way, way back. And I was digging into the origins of Wirecard this week. And I have to say, for a company that ended up replacing, Commerzbank in the DAX index, their beginnings were, well, let's call them colorful.
Colorful's being very, very generous. Seedy might be the more accurate term.
Okay, fair enough. So let's rewind. The year's 1999. We're in Aschheim, which is a quiet suburb near Munich. Wirecard is founded. And usually when we think of fintech startups, we think of sleek apps, people in coffee shops, solving problems for millennials. But Wirecard's initial client base wasn't exactly selling artisan coffee.
No, not at all. They were processing payments for pornography and online gambling websites.
Right.
And we really need to pause here for a second because this isn't just some salacious detail to get people interested. It is actually the cornerstone of their entire business philosophy.
Okay, explain that. Because in 1999, 2000, processing credit card payments for a porn site wasn't something a respectable bank wanted to get anywhere near.
Exactly. In the banking world, this is what's classified as high risk. And it's high risk for a few reasons. First, you got the obvious reputational risk. Deutsche Bank doesn't want hotbabes.com showing up on their official client list.
Of course not.
But maybe even more importantly, the financial risk is all about chargebacks.
Chargebacks. So that's when a customer, calls their credit card company and says, hey, I didn't make this charge.
Correct. And in the world of online porn and gambling, that happens constantly, all the time. People gamble, they lose money, they regret it, and then they claim their card was stolen.
Or they subscribe to a site, get caught by their spouse, and then claim fraud to cover their tracks.
It's a messy, high-churn, complicated business.
So because the big, respectable banks wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole, Wirecard just stepped right in. And I'm guessing they weren't doing it out of the kindness of their hearts.
Oh, absolutely not. They did it because they could charge exorbitant fees.
Mm-hmm.
If you are the lender of last resort or the processor of last resort, you can dictate the terms.
Right.
Wirecard was making margins that standard payment processors could only dream of. But I think more importantly than the money, it taught the company a very, very dangerous lesson.
And what was that lesson?
The lesson was, you can get really rich by operating in the shadows. You can build a massive business by processing payments that other people won't, and, crucially, by not asking too many questions about where the money is coming from or where it's going.
So it baked this kind of opacity right into their corporate DNA from day one.
It did.
It's almost like they started out as a black ops payment processor.
Mm-hmm.
So when they eventually tried to pivot to more legitimate businesses, airlines and retail, they just kept that same don't look too closely at the books mentality.
Precisely. They normalized secrecy. In a normal, healthy company, complexity is a bug. It's something you try to eliminate.
Yeah, you want things to be simple.
In Wirecard, complexity was a feature. It was how they hid everything. It was how they hid the bodies, so to speak.
So, okay, they're chugging along with the gambling and porn money, but then the dot-com bubble bursts in the early 2000s.
Right.
And Wirecard nearly goes under. I mean, they were right on the brink of bankruptcy in 2002. And this is where the central antagonist of our story makes his grand entrance, Markus Braun.
Enter Markus Braun. He's this Austrian consultant, and his background is actually from KPMG.
Oh, interesting.
He comes in, he injects capital, saves the company from total insolvency, and takes over as the CEO. He's the one who really consolidated the business model. He had this grand vision of Wirecard as a technology powerhouse, not just a, back office payment plumber.
But he also had a very, very aggressive approach to growth. And this leads us to 2005. Wirecard wants to go public.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been around markets long enough to know that an IPO, an initial public offering, is a huge deal. It's like it's a financial colonoscopy.
That's a great way to put it.
You've got bankers, lawyers, auditors, regulators, just everyone tearing through your documents for months on end.
It is an absolutely grueling process. You have to publish a prospectus that details every single risk, every debt, every lawsuit. You have to go on a roadshow and convince these really skeptical investors that your business is real. It's the gatekeeper of the public markets.
But Wirecard looked at that gate and said, nah, we'll just hop the fence.
They did.
They did what's called a reverse IPO. And I really want to unpack this because the mechanism they used is it's both hilarious and terrifying at the same time. They bought a company called Infogenie AG.
Infogenie, you just can't make this stuff up.
So for our listeners who might not know, what on earth was Infogenie?
So Infogenie was a penny stock. It was listed in Berlin, and they had absolutely nothing to do with payments or fintech. Their business was operating telephone advice hotlines.
You mean like 1-900 numbers?
Exactly. We're talking tech support, horoscopes, relationship advice, and probably some of the more adult conversations that we were alluding to earlier.
I see.
By 2004, Infogenie was basically a zombie company. The stock exchange actually wanted to delist them because their share price was effectively zero.
So Wirecard, instead of doing its own proper, heavily scrutinized IPO, decides to just buy this dying hotline company.
Correct. In December of 2004, the shareholders of Infogenie agreed to a capital increase in exchange for acquiring Wirecard. So mechanically, Infogenie bought Wirecard, but in reality, Wirecard took over Infogenie.
And then what?
They changed the name from Infogenie to Wirecard, and voila. On January 1st, 2005, Wirecard was a publicly traded corporation.
That is just wild. They literally wore the skin of a dead company to sneak onto the stock exchange.
That is a very vivid and I think a very accurate way to put it, and here's why that matters so much. By doing a reverse IPO, they skipped all the scrutiny.
No roadshow.
No roadshow, no deep audit by skeptical investment banks, no detailed prospectus for investors to pick apart. They just sort of appeared on the market.
I mean, that feels like such a massive red flag. If a company is actively avoiding scrutiny on day one, shouldn't investors be incredibly wary?
They should be. Of course they should. And to be fair, some were. But you have to remember the context of the time. This was 2005. The tech market was recovering from the dot-com bust.
Okay.
People were hungry, especially in Germany, for a German tech success story. And Markus Braun was very, very good at selling the vision. He talked about the cashless society, the digitization of money. He sounded like a true visionary.
And the growth chart seemed to back him up. I mean, they rocketed into the tech DAX in 2006. They were growing faster than anyone else.
We were.
And then the real crowning achievement came in September of 2018. Wirecard joins the DAX 30.
This was a massive cultural moment in Germany.
Yeah.
The DAX 30 is the elite club. It's the German equivalent of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. You're talking BMW, Siemens, Adidas, Volkswagen.
The absolute titans of German industry.
And Wirecard joined the club.
And you have to look at who they replaced. They kicked out Commerzbank.
The symbolism there was intoxicating. It was just perfect for their narrative. Commerzbank was founded in 1870. It was the establishment. It was old money, traditional banking.
Right.
And here comes Wirecard, founded in a Munich suburb in 1999, kicking the old guard out the door. It looked like the future defeating the past.
It's the perfect story. Old banking is dead, fintech is king, and I mean, investors just ate it up. At its peak, Wirecard was valued at over 24 billion euros.
It was worth more than Deutsche Bank at one point.
That's staggering.
Just let that sink in for a minute. A payment processor that started out with porn and gambling sites was worth more than the biggest, most systemically important bank in Germany.
So let's talk about what they claimed they were actually doing to justify that 24 billion euro valuation. Because you can't just say we process payments and be worth that much. You need to have a special sauce, some kind of magic.
Right. They claimed to have a financial ecosystem. Their business, on paper, had three main pillars. First, the bread and butter, payment processing, and risk management.
Okay.
This is just acting as the middleman between a merchant, like an airline or a shop, and the credit card network, like Visa or MasterCard. They take a tiny little cut of every single transaction.
Okay, that's standard stuff. I mean, PayPal does that, ADN does that, nothing special there.
Second pillar was card issuing. So they would issue physical or virtual debit cards for other companies. So if a new startup wanted to launch a cool new banking app, Wirecard would provide the actual card infrastructure in the background.
Right. I remember they worked with companies like Revolut in the early days and a bunch of other smaller fintech apps.
They did.
And they had big names in their client list. I remember seeing their client deck, Allianz, KLM, Qatar Airways, Transport for London. Yeah. I mean, if you saw that list, you'd think, okay, this is a legitimate blue chip operation.
And they did have real clients. That's what makes the fraud so tricky. The business wasn't completely fake.
Okay.
The European part of the business was real. It was actually losing money for the most part, but it was real. They were processing real payments for real companies like Aldi and Lidl.
But the real growth story, the thing that was driving the stock price, wasn't Aldi or Lidl. It was all the innovation stuff. I remember the Boon app.
Boon, yes. It was their mobile payment app that gave you a virtual MasterCard on your phone. It was Apple Pay and Google Pay compatible.
And it was a decent product, wasn't it?
It was actually a pretty good product, but it wasn't making them billions of euros in profit. Not even close.
And then there was the China connection. I feel like this was the narrative that really, really drove the stock price into the stratosphere.
The Alipay narrative. This was pure genius from a storytelling perspective. Wirecard claimed to be the indispensable bridge between China and Europe. They partnered with Alipay and WeChat Pay, which are, the completely dominant payment apps in China.
Right.
And the pitch was simple. When millions of Chinese tourists come to Paris or Munich to buy luxury handbags and watches, they want to pay with their phones. Wirecard is the company that makes that happen.
It sounded like a license to print money. You have millions of wealthy tourists, billions in potential transactions.
It was an incredibly compelling story. They announced these huge partnerships with Printemps, the big department store in Paris, the body shop, Munich airport. It positioned Wirecard as the only player who could unlock this massive, massive revenue stream.
So on the surface, you've got real clients, you've got cool apps, this massive Chinese expansion, and the financials looked absolutely incredible.
A hockey stick graph.
Totally. In 2013, their revenue was, 482 million euros. By 2018, it was over 2 billion. Assets just quadrupled in that same period.
And then in 2019, they got what seemed like the ultimate validation. SoftBank, Masayoshi Son's massive Japanese investment fund invested.
And that's a huge stamp of approval.
It's the biggest. When SoftBank puts money in, the market takes that as a sign that you have officially made it to the global big leagues.
And there is always a but in these deep dives. While the stock price was climbing, and while the German public was celebrating their new tech champion, there were smart people scratching their heads.
There were.
Because the math just wasn't adding up.
No, it wasn't. And this is where we need to introduce a concept that is absolutely critical to understanding the entire fraud. We have to talk about third-party acquirers, or TPAs.
Okay, let's slow down and really explain this, because I'll be honest, when I first started reading about the scandal years ago, this was the part that confused me the most. What is a third-party acquirer?
So imagine Wirecard wants to do business in a country where it doesn't have a financial license. Let's say the Philippines or Malaysia or Dubai.
Okay.
They can't legally process the credit card swipe themselves because they aren't a licensed bank or financial institution in that jurisdiction.
So they're blocked. They can't operate there.
Theoretically, yes.
Mm.
But instead of giving up or going through the long process of getting a license, they just hire a local partner. This local partner is the third-party acquirer.
And that partner has the license.
Exactly. The TPA has the license. So the TPA processes the transaction for the merchant in that country. They take the customer's money, they hold it, and then in theory, they pass it on to Wirecard, minus a commission.
So it's basically like outsourcing the actual work.
It's exactly like outsourcing. It's like being an Uber driver, but you don't have a car or a driver's license, so you hire a guy who does have a car to drive people around, and then you tell everyone that you're the one running the successful taxi business.
And Wirecard claimed that this TPA business was huge.
This is the absolute key to the entire fraud. Wirecard claimed that roughly half of their entire transaction volume and the vast, vast majority of their operating profit came from these obscure TPA partners in Asia and the Middle East.
Wait. Half their business was coming from these outsourced partners that no one had ever heard of.
Yes, and because it was outsourced, Wirecard didn't have any of the associated costs. They didn't have to pay for servers or staff or office space in those countries. They just booked the revenue.
So that's why their profit margins look so much better than all their competitors.
Exactly. They claim to be making these massive profits with basically zero cost.
I mean, that sounds way too good to be true. We have billions in revenue, but it's all happening over there in that other company's books. Don't worry about it.
And that is exactly what the skeptics started to notice. As far back as 2008 and certainly by 2015, people were looking at this TPA structure and saying, this doesn't make any sense. This smells wrong.
And this brings us to the heroes of this story.
Yeah.
The people who didn't buy the hype. We have to talk about the Financial Times and the short sellers.
The FT, and specifically a journalist there named Dan McCrum, they deserve a Pulitzer and a half for what they did.
Absolutely.
In 2015, the FT's blog, it's called FT Alphaville, started a series called The House of Wirecard. And they just started methodically picking apart the accounting. They were asking the simple question.
Like what?
Like, where are these assets really? And why is a company that claims to be making so much profit constantly asking for more cash from investors?
That's a classic tell, isn't it? If you're so profitable, why do you always need to borrow more money?
Exactly. Cash flow should be strong. And then in 2016, things got really, really spicy. We got the Zatara report.
Zatara. It honestly sounds like a villain in a James Bond movie.
It does, doesn't it? It was actually a pseudonym used by Fraser Puring of Viceroy Research and Matthew Earl of Shadowfall. Now, these guys are short sellers.
So investors who are betting that a stock price will go down.
Correct. And they released this bombshell 101-page report accusing Wirecard of, well, everything. Fraud and money laundering.
I read parts of the Zatara report recently. It wasn't subtle at all. They basically just said, this is a crime scene.
They did. They alleged that the TPA business in Asia was largely, if not entirely, fake. They claimed Wirecard was laundering money for illegal offshore gambling rings. It was a dossier of just nuclear accusations.
Now, in a normal functioning market, if someone drops a 100-page report alleging massive fraud and money laundering, the regulator, in this case BaFin, the German regulator, would kick down the doors of the company and start seizing hard drives.
You would think. You would absolutely think. But this is where the story becomes a true tragedy of German institutional pride. BaFin didn't investigate Wirecard.
Unbelievable.
They investigated the short sellers.
That is just mind-blowing to me even now. The guys pointing out the fire get arrested for arson.
Effectively, yes. BaFin and the prosecutors in Bavaria bought into Wirecard's narrative completely. And Wirecard's narrative was that these Anglo-Saxon speculators were trying to manipulate the market to destroy a great German champion.
So it became a nationalist issue.
It became a nationalist issue. They are attacking our success story. This is an attack on Germany.
So the Bavarian prosecutors actually opened criminal investigations against Fraser Puring and the others.
They did. They threatened them with jail time.
Yeah.
And it created this circle the wagons mentality in the German establishment. If you criticized Wirecard, you weren't just a skeptic, you were attacking Germany itself.
But the Financial Times didn't stop. In January 2019, Dan McCrum published what really should have been the kill shot.
January 30th, 2019. The FT reports that a senior executive in Wirecard's Asia-Pacific operations, a guy by the name of Ido Kurniawan, was suspected internally of falsification of accounts and round-tripping.
Okay, round tripping. We need to define this because this is the core of how they kept the balloon inflated for so long.
So imagine I have a company. I want to look successful. I want to show growing revenue. I take, say, 100 euros out of my company's left pocket.
Okay.
I transfer it to a subsidiary I control in Hong Kong. That subsidiary then transfers it to a so-called partner company in India. That partner then pays me back the 100 euros for some fake software services.
So the money just comes right back into your right pocket.
Exactly. And I record that 100 euros coming in as revenue. My stock price goes up because look at all this amazing revenue growth. But I haven't actually made a single dime. I've just moved my own money in a circle.
It's financial illusionism. You're just creating the appearance of activity where there is none.
And the FT had the documents. They had internal spreadsheets. They had emails. They had proof that this was happening in the Singapore office.
And what did Wirecard do? Did they finally apologize? Did they launch a real internal investigation?
No, they went nuclear. They sued the Financial Times for unethical reporting. They claimed the documents were fake, part of the conspiracy. And BaFin did something absolutely unprecedented.
This is the part of the story that still shocks me the most.
In February of 2019, BaFin, the German financial regulator, banned the short selling of Wirecard shares.
They made it illegal to bet against the company.
They made it illegal. It was a massive intervention in the free market to protect a single company. And to top it all off, they filed a criminal complaint against Dan McCrum and his colleague for market manipulation.
I try to imagine being Dan McCrum in that moment. You have the truth. You have the evidence in your hands. And the government of Germany is actively trying to put you in jail while the actual fraudsters are ringing the opening bell at the stock exchange.
It's terrifying. It's the stuff of nightmares for a journalist. But it wasn't just legal threats. And this is where the deep dive gets really dark. We have to talk about Dark Basin.
This sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but it's completely real.
It is very real. In June of 2020, just as everything was collapsing, a group called Citizen Lab at the University of Toronto released a stunning report. They had uncovered a sophisticated hackers-for-hire group operating out of India.
A company called Beltrot's Infotech.
Linked to that company, yes. And the group was codenamed Dark Basin.
And who is hiring these hackers?
Well, the client list is officially confidential, but the targets of the hacking campaigns tell the story. The people being relentlessly targeted were hedge funds, short sellers, investigators, and journalists.
All of whom were critical of Wirecard.
Every single one. So if you were asking tough questions about Wirecard's balance sheet, suddenly your email inbox is getting bombarded day after day.
With what?
Sophisticated phishing attacks, attempts to steal your passwords, attempts to gain access to your private communications, your sources. Dan McCrum was targeted. Fraser Paring was targeted. It was a coordinated campaign of digital espionage designed to silence the critics.
It just shows the lengths they were willing to go to. This wasn't just, cooking the books. This was an active intelligence operation to suppress the truth.
It was warfare. But here's the thing about accounting fraud, and it's always true. You can fake revenue. You can fake profit, but you cannot fake cash forever. Eventually, you have to pay the bills. You have to pay back the loans.
Gravity always wins.
Gravity always wins. By late 2019, the pressure was mounting. The FT reports were damaging the stock price no matter how much they denied them. Investors were getting nervous. So Wirecard made a very desperate move.
What did they do?
They hired KPMG, one of the Big Four global auditors, to conduct a special independent audit.
Okay, so the idea was KPMG will come in, check everything, they'll give us a clean bill of health, a gold star, and then all these critics will have to shut up forever.
That was the plan. But it was a massive, massive gamble. Because unlike EY, Ernst & Young, who had been auditing Wirecard for years and had apparently been sleeping at the wheel,
right.
KPMG came in fresh, with a skeptical eye, and they started asking for the documents.
Specifically, they asked for the documents related to those third-party acquirers in Asia, the source of all the profit.
Exactly. Show us the bank statements. Show us the original transaction logs from your partners.
And Wirecard couldn't produce them.
They couldn't. They kept delaying. They made excuse after excuse. Oh, the server is down today. Oh, privacy laws in Singapore prevent us from sharing that information directly.
The classic dog ate my homework defense.
Basically. In March of 2020, Wirecard tried to bluff their way through it. They put out a press release claiming that KPMG had found no discrepancies.
But that wasn't true.
It was a lie. The truth came out on April 28, 2020. KPMG officially released their report and was absolutely devastating. Now, they didn't explicitly say it's a fraud, But they said something that, for an auditor, is almost worse. They said, "We cannot verify that this money exists."
Which in the world of auditing, that's the polite way of screaming fire at the top of your lungs.
It is. The stock tanked 26% that day. The hedge fund TCI filed new criminal complaints. The facade was just cracking wide open.
And then we get to June 2020, the final spectacular explosion.
It all came down to the 2019 annual report. It was supposed to be released on June 18th. If they didn't release it, their loans, billions in loans, would be called in by the banks.
And they needed their longtime auditor, EY, to sign off on it.
But EY, finally feeling the intense heat from the KPMG report and the media, decided to actually, for the first time, properly check the bank accounts in the Philippines where this money was supposed to be.
Better late than never, I guess.
I suppose.
Yeah.
So Wirecard had claimed for years that 1.9 billion euros, which was effectively all of their profit from the last decade, was sitting in escrow accounts at two banks in the Philippines, BDO Unibank and the Bank of the Philippine Islands.
And what happened when EY finally called them?
The bank said, "We have no idea who you are. These account numbers you're giving us don't exist. These documents you have, these confirmation letters, they are forgeries."
Boom.
The Central Bank of the Philippines then jumped in and made an official statement saying, quote, "The money never entered the Philippine financial system."
So on June 18th, 2020, instead of announcing a huge profit, Wirecard had to issue a statement saying that 1.9 billion euros was missing.
Markus Braun resigned the very next day, June 19th. And here's a fantastic piece of corporate trivia. They appointed an interim CEO, an American guy named James Fries. He had joined the company, get this, the evening before.
No. Can you imagine? It's your first day on the job. You get hired as the new compliance guy. You walk in on a Thursday, and on Friday, the CEO quits, and the company announces it's missing 2 billion euros.
Here are the keys to the castle. Good luck.
Unbelievable.
He apparently looked at the books over the weekend, realized it wasn't just a liquidity issue, but a total catastrophic fraud. And he was the one who ultimately had to file for insolvency. His tenure as CEO lasted just 85 days.
So Markus Braun was arrested on June 22nd. But while he was being processed and sitting in a Munich jail cell, the other key figure in this whole drama decided to execute his own exit strategy.
Jan Marsalek.
Jan Marsalek, the chief operating officer, the man who's in charge of all the Asia operations, the man who managed the TPA relationships.
The man who is currently one of Europe's most wanted fugitives.
He just vanished.
He vanished. He told his colleagues he was flying to the Philippines to personally find the missing money. He even had immigration records faked to show that he had entered the Philippines, but he didn't go to Manila.
So where did he go?
According to incredible investigations by Bellingcat and the German newspaper Der Spiegel, he took a private jet to Belarus, and from there he was spirited away to Russia.
And the strong suspicion is that he's living in Moscow now.
Yes, possibly under the protection of the Russian intelligence services, the FSB.
Which brings us right back to the spy thriller aspect of this whole thing. It turns out Marsalek might have been feeding information to various intelligence agencies for years. He was living a double life.
It adds a whole other layer of shadow and intrigue. I mean, was Wirecard just a massive accounting fraud, or was it also a money laundering operation for intelligence services and their various activities? We may never know the full extent of it.
So the company completely collapses. Insolvency is filed on June 25th, 2020. The stock, which had been in the DAX 30, goes to pennies. Thousands of people lose their jobs.
It was a total bloodbath. The insolvency administrator came in and immediately cut 730 staff. The company was just chopped up and sold for parts.
Right. Santander bought the core European tech for a measly 100 million euros.
100 million. For a company that was valued at 24 billion just 2 years earlier, Railsbank bought the UK arm. The empire that Markus Braun had built was just sold for scrap metal.
So that was the crash, an absolute spectacular implosion. But legal justice, as we know, moves a lot slower than the stock market.
Much slower.
And that brings us to the core reason we are doing this deep dive today. We need to talk about what happened just last month, in January of 2026, in a courtroom in Singapore.
This is the closure we've been waiting for years. We knew the money was missing. We knew the documents were forged. But we needed the courts to officially establish exactly who did it and how they did it.
We saw some of the initial convictions back in 2023. James Wardhana and Chai Lim, they got relatively short sentences for their roles. But the big fish in the Singapore operation were sentenced just a few weeks ago.
Shanmugaratnam and James Henry O'Sullivan.
Let's start with Shanmugaratnam. He ran a small trustee company called Citadel Corporate Services. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. What was his role in all this?
He was the guy with the stamp. It's as simple as that. He was a trustee. His job, on paper, was to hold money in escrow accounts for third parties.
Okay.
Wirecard needed to prove to their auditors, to EY, that the money from the TPA business actually existed, so they would ask Shanmugaratnam to issue an official confirmation letter.
A letter that would say something like, yes, I can confirm my company Citadel is holding 500 million euros in an escrow account on behalf of Wirecard.
Exactly that. And he wrote those letters year after year. He signed documents claiming Citadel held huge sums of money, at one point up to 1.1 billion euros.
But the accounts were empty.
The accounts were empty, or they contained a tiny fraction of what was claimed. He was simply lying on official letterhead to fool the auditors.
And for that service, I'm assuming he was paid handsomely.
He wasn't doing it for free, no. But compared to the billions that were at stake, the bribes were probably relatively small. He got 10 years for falsification of accounts. That is a very heavy sentence in Singapore.
And then there's the other guy, James Henry O'Sullivan. He got 6.5 years.
O'Sullivan was the coordinator. He was the link man. He was the bridge between Wirecard's top management, like Jan Marsalek, and the local guys on the ground, like Shanmugaratnam. He facilitated the arrangements. The court found that he was instrumental in setting up and maintaining this entire structure of lies.
I mean, this is the smoking gun, isn't it? This is the final nail in the coffin.
It absolutely is. It's judicial confirmation. It proves, beyond any doubt, that the missing 1.9 billion euros wasn't stolen by some rogue hacker. It wasn't lost in a bad investment.
It was a complete fabrication from the start.
It was a fabrication. These men went to prison for long sentences because they signed pieces of paper saying money existed when they knew for a fact that it didn't.
It effectively closes the loop on the entire mechanism. Wirecard used the TPA structure to create fake revenue out of thin air. They used trustees like Shanmugaratnam to create fake verification for that fake revenue.
And they used the complexity of international banking with all its different jurisdictions to hide it all from the auditors sitting back in Germany.
And it worked. For over a decade, it worked. That is the really scary part. If the Financial Times hadn't been so dogged, so persistent, or if the pandemic hadn't caused market jitters that ultimately led to that special KPMG audit, they might still be doing it today.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
It really is. It makes you realize just how much of our global financial system runs on, well, on blind trust.
It's the trust economy. We trust the bank statement is real. We trust the auditor stamp means something. We trust that a company in the DAX 30 must be legitimate because, well, it's in the DAX.
Right.
Wirecard weaponized that trust. They knew that people wanted to believe in them.
Germany wanted a tech champion to rival the giants in Silicon Valley. Investors wanted those incredible returns.
Exactly. Confirmation bias is a hell of a drug. When you looked at Wirecard, if you wanted to see a spectacular success, you saw a spectacular success. If you looked closely, you saw a crime scene. But most people, including the regulator, didn't want to look closely.
And the regulators, Bayfin, they were the worst offenders of all. They were so protective of the home team that they completely forgot their job was to be the impartial referee.
It is the Enron of Germany, but you're right, in some ways it's worse. Because with Enron, the regulators and the authorities eventually caught on and prosecuted them. With Wirecard, the regulators were actively fighting against the people who were trying to expose the fraud.
It's a stain on Germany's financial reputation that I think will take a generation to wash out.
I agree.
So, sitting here now, in early 2026, looking at the 10-year sentence for Shanmugaratnam, looking at the ruins of what was once a 24 billion euro giant. What is the big takeaway from all this?
For me, it comes down to one word: complexity. Whenever a company tells you, oh, our business model is too complicated for you to understand, or we make money in these very complex ways in faraway places, run.
Complexity is camouflage.
Always. Wirecard used a web of subsidiaries, TPAs, trustees in Singapore, and endless excuses about privacy laws to hide a very, very simple truth. They weren't actually making any money.
Right.
Genuine, healthy businesses can usually explain how they make money in 2 sentences. We sell phones, we fly planes, we sell coffee. When the answer becomes a flowchart involving 3 continents and an obscure trustee in Singapore, you should be very, very worried.
And I keep thinking about the whistleblowers. Pei Viel, the senior legal counsel in Singapore who leaks those initial documents to the FT. He risked his entire career, his personal safety.
He's a hero, a genuine hero. In a world of dark basin hackers and state-level intimidation and legal threats, to stand up and say, this is a lie, is an act of incredible bravery.
It really is. So, We have form of closure. The fraudsters are either in jail or they're in Russia. The company is gone. But it still leaves you with this really nagging question.
And what's that?
If a DAX 30 company, a national champion, audited by a Big Four firm like EY, regulated by BaFin, could successfully fake 1.9 billion euros in cash for a decade, where else is this happening right now?
That is the question that should keep all of us up at night. There is almost certainly another Wirecard out there. Maybe it's not as big, maybe it's not German, but somewhere, right now, there is a company posting record profits based on a spreadsheet that is nothing but pure fiction.
And on that absolutely terrifying note, I think we're going to wrap it up.
Sleep tight, everyone!
Check your sources. Be skeptical of those hockey stick growth charts. And maybe, just maybe, double-check if your favorite fintech darling used to run a telephone psychic hotline. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
Stay curious.
We'll see you next time.